Chapter 33:30. She had to appease this fellow's irritable mood first. Otherwise, this fellow might really find someone to kill that unlucky female cultivator. It wasn't easy for her to save that female cultivator, Sister How. After going through untold hardships, she passed the tribulation and smoothly ascended to the deity realm. If she was secretly killed by Emolien for such a reason, wouldn't it be too unjust? Abba felt that she shouldn't provoke a man who suddenly lost his mind. She stole a glance at him and pursed her lips. Actually, it wasn't that she couldn't understand Lien's thoughts. He just wouldn't allow her to risk her life for some idle people's business. But in fact, she didn't risk her life. She really wasn't impulsive. She just didn't know why, but Abba was very confident that the heavenly Tao lightning fire wouldn't dare to attack her. To be honest, she didn't understand where this inexplicable fearlessness came from. "Why aren't you talking?" Abba threw him the back of her head and put on a "I'm too lazy to talk to you" look. "Talk." Seeing that she obediently agreed to his request, Emolien's mood improved a little. As long as this little fellow was obedient and didn't put herself in danger, and didn't make him worried and uneasy, he could do whatever she wanted. He reached out and pinched her little earlobe, and the expression on his face relaxed. Lord Jojo turned his head and glared at him unhappily. "Chirp." He leaned forward and kissed her little face. He grabbed her little hand that was trying to wipe her face with her sleeve and called out helplessly, "Jojo. Don't think that this emperor will forgive your previous rebellion just because you look back at the little Emperor Jojo with an innocent look. I'm scared." He rubbed his forehead against hers and whispered softly, "My heart almost jumped out of my chest just now." At that moment, the panic that was deeply gripped by fear made him feel as if he had sunk into darkness. Only the heavens knew how much strength he used to control himself from going berserk on the spot and slapping that female cultivator to death. If this female practitioner's 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation would threaten Jojo's safety, he would not hesitate to personally deal with this insignificant person. In fact, he had always been such a cold and heartless person. His bottom line was, not to hurt his Jojo. Abba turned his head to look at him, his heart inexplicably softening, but he also felt that this guy had challenged the little emperor's authority before. Moreover, this fellow had used that kind of terrifying gaze to threaten the little emperor. She definitely would not forgive him so easily. He had to make him beg and beg until he forgave him. Humph. Emolien carelessly nuzzled her head twice. Just as he carried her around the flower path on the side and saw that the magnolia court was right in front of them, they suddenly heard chaotic footsteps coming from the other side of the magnolia court's perimeter wall. "I'm going to kill you." Suddenly, a loud shout was heard. In an instant, the courtyard was filled with chaos and chaos. Emolien stood in place with Arbor in his arms. The couple looked over in confusion, only to see a large group of nannies and maidservants running after the two of them, one in front and one behind, with pale faces. They kept exclaiming, "Young lady, madam, please stop." Arbor saw the madam of the 5th branch, Hua She, running in front of them. They had played horse gambling together before, so she naturally had a deep impression of this madam of the 5th branch. After all, she had lost a lot of money to her. Chapter 33:31. Jojo always had a deep impression of the people who gave him money. How could Hua She, the wife of the 5th branch, not recognize her? As for the woman with the disheveled hair and ferocious red eyes, she didn't recognize her at all. That woman was slightly younger than Hua She. She raised a kitchen knife high in the air and shouted, "I'll kill you," as she chased after Hua She. Her expression was slightly terrifying. Chiao Mu reflexively tightened her grip on Emolien's clothes, and her eyes curiously followed the fiendish woman who was swiftly chasing after them. "Miss." Jean-Ju quickly caught up. She wanted to grab onto her miss several times, but she struggled free every time. Jean-Ju also knew that no matter who it was, they wouldn't be able to calm down. But this matter. One was willing to hit while the other was willing to be hit. Her miss could only blame herself for being greedy, for being deceived. "Miss. Oh my, what's going on? What is second young mistress doing?" The clamor in the courtyard attracted more and more female servants to rush over. When they saw the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess standing to the side, they didn't dare to act rashly. They hurriedly retreated a dozen steps and hid behind the wall to secretly peek. The crowd in front of them was so noisy that they blocked the road back to Yulon Court. Emolien put down his wife, who was struggling with her small hands and legs. His other hand still held onto her small hand and pulled her to his side. "Jojo, who are they?" After the Crown Prince calmed down, he saw that his wife wasn't in a good mood. Naturally, he wanted to tease her to talk. It was just a casual question. His thoughts were all on his wife. How could he pay attention to the noisy women in front of him? Auber was watching the show with curiosity. A group of people in front of him were pushing and shoving to block the woman with the disheveled hair. A few of them shrunk their necks and protected the wife of the fifth branch as they escaped. The little fellow casually replied, "That's the wife of the fifth branch. I've never seen the one with the kitchen knife." After she finished speaking, she realized that she was actually talking to Emolien. She angrily turned her head to the side. The Crown Prince couldn't help but laugh. He raised his hand to rub the little fellow's furry head and said softly, all right, I apologize. Don't ignore me. It was my bad attitude just now. If there's anything in the future, I'll talk to you nicely." Humph. Auber turned to look at him, rolled his eyes, and turned his head back. He reached out and pinched her little face. "You bit me just now. It hurts. If I give you 2 more bites, you can't be angry anymore." "Who wants to bite you?" When Xiao Mu recalled that stiff and taut feeling when she bit him just now, her small face instantly darkened. She almost bit her teeth until they broke. Who would be willing to bite him? "Then should I bite you?" Emolien blinked. "Bah, shameless bastard, you still want to bite me?" Auber turned her head, her little face tense. Emolien couldn't help but smile and rub his face against hers. "Jojo, I've already apologized and begged for mercy. What else do you want?" "Bad person, you're right. It's my fault. I spoiled you." Auber reached out to pinch his face. "You're not allowed to make trouble for others." Humph. Emolien glanced at her and said sourly, "Why are you interested in that female cultivator you don't even know?" Auber tilted her little head and muttered to herself for a few seconds. "She's pleasing to the eye." Chapter 33-32. Haha, what an excellent reason. Emolien could not help but laugh. He poked the willful little guy's face. "Jojo, if you don't give me a Cold War, I won't go find trouble with others. How's that?" Sir Jojo, who had wanted to nod, glared at him exasperatedly. What was the connection between the two? Why did he have to go find trouble with unimportant people just because she gave him a Cold War? That was simply despicable. Emolien looked at her innocently. He reached out and shook her little body. "Wifey. When I'm scared, my soul will scatter and I'll lose my mind. I'll do things that even I can't predict. You know that, right?" Auber felt her teeth itch. She really wanted to bite him. However, when she thought about how hard it would be, she decided against it. She glanced at him and said, "Are you still going to rebel? Are you still going to yell at me?" Emolien secretly twitched his mouth. He did not know whether to laugh or cry as he hugged her and shook his head. "I don't dare. Whatever the little emperor says is right." Humph. Auber reached out and hugged his waist. She put her little face in his arms and rubbed against him. She said in a muffled voice, "I'm sorry." Emolien was taken aback, but then he smiled faintly and patted her small head. "Don't worry." Auber looked up at Emolien. She thought for a while and said, "Although I don't know what's going on, but I think that Heavenly Tao should be a little afraid of my master and Uncle Master. Otherwise, back then, when I was in the lower starfield, I had already gained control of the holy water of the 5 spirits. It wouldn't have allowed me to stay in the lower starfield and turn a blind eye to my existence." Emolien thought about it carefully. He felt that Jojo's analysis made sense. He could not help but relax a little. He nodded and said, "Okay, but no matter what dangerous things you do in the future, you have to tell me first, okay? Aber nodded subconsciously. Then she said unhappily, Humph. Before you do something dangerous, will you tell Chow Chow? Don't think that Jojo has forgotten. Previously, you and Duan Yu and Rotten Peach Blossom. Of course. Emolyen's survival instincts were so strong that she immediately responded. She then pointed to the front and exclaimed, Hey Jojo, look! That madam of the fifth household is being pressed to the ground. Abba had wanted to take this opportunity to harshly chide him, but when he heard him yell, his gaze involuntarily followed the finger he was pointing at. His attention was diverted by this black-bellied fellow. Looking at the scene, he couldn't help but want to laugh. At this moment, the group of people in front of him was truly in chaos. Everyone was lying on top of each other like a human pyramid, tearing and beating each other. The madam of the fifth branch, Hua Shi, was at the bottom of the crowd. She could only stretch out half of her arm, twitching as if she was struggling. She let out ear-piercing screams. The kitchen knife in the hands of the unfamiliar woman on her back had already been snatched away by the old granny and thrown to the ground. She was currently using her fists to beat the madam of the fifth branch's head and body. Faint streaks of blood floated in her eyes, and she was cursing endlessly. When Mu Qingya came over with Granny Chiu after hearing the news, they saw that the entrance of Yulon Court had already turned into a pot of porridge. Her face darkened, then turned green. Mu Qingya could not help but raise her voice and scold angrily, Why aren't you stopping? Look at what you've become. Stop. Stop, stop. Granny Chiu yelled angrily. Chapter 33:33. Taking a step forward, Nanny Chiu pointed at the group of servants and shouted at the servants behind her, What are you all standing there for? Why don't you separate them? More than a dozen old maids were strong. They quickly stepped forward and picked up the maids who were stacked together. They slapped them twice and threw them to the side. After pulling the messy servants apart, several servants stepped forward to pull the madam of the fifth branch and the second eldest aunt who were hugging and tearing at each other. After tearing the two apart, the two were still cursing each other. With disheveled hair and bloodshot eyes, they kept stretching out their feet to kick each other. Mu Qingya was immediately enraged. She took a few steps forward to Madame Wu and second young madam and slapped each of them hard on the face. How long are you going to make a fuss? Sister-in-law, why did you hit me? You should hit this B*TCH. Mu Dongni shouted in exasperation. Do you know what she did? Mu Dongni opened her mouth to speak but felt a pain in her cheeks. Her face twisted as she roared, This B*TCH cheated me of 1,000,000 spirit coins. 1,000,000 spirit coins. After her husband died, she was no longer single. She only had so little property. She didn't expect that she would be cheated out of it overnight. She even wanted to kill her fifth sister-in-law. What do you mean by 1,000,000 spirit coins? Mu Qingya was baffled and roared, Speak properly. Don't you see the crown prince and the crown princess are here? Look at what you've become. Mu Qingya was so angry that her chest heaved up and down. She stared coldly at Mu Dongni and Madame Hua in front of her. Madame Hua's hair was all drooping down. At this time, she didn't look like a beautiful woman at all. Her clothes were torn into a mess by Mu Dongni, and half of her undergarment was exposed. At this time, she felt a slight pain in her scalp. Just now, Mu Dongni had pulled her hair and beaten her so hard that 2 pieces of her scalp were torn off. She thought she was going to die. Sister-in-law, this B*TCH cheated me of all my property. Who can I reason with? Mu Dongni screamed. This second miss, who had lost her husband and stayed at home, had never been someone easy to worry about. Mu Qingya felt a headache coming on when she saw her. She couldn't help but say, If you don't tell me clearly, how am I supposed to know what's going on between you two? All right, let's not talk about it here. Let's go to the Golden Garden and figure this out. Mu Dongni said angrily, No need. Let's make it clear here. She glanced around and finally saw the crown prince and the crown princess clearly. She hurriedly said, Since the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess are both here, why don't you be the judge for Auntie? She took out a crumpled yellow talisman paper from her pocket and held it in her hand as she said to the crowd, "Hey, hey, hey, look. Fifth sister-in-law lied to me that it was a golden talisman and asked me to give it to her with all my wealth. You cheated me of all my assets in one night. You guys, be my judge. Tell me, is there such a shameless thing in this world? Golden talisman?" The little crown princess looked curiously at the talisman paper in Mu Dongni's hand. She could feel that this yellow talisman only looked like a talisman. There was no fluctuation of talisman power on it, so it couldn't be a talisman paper at all. Besides, what the hell was a golden talisman? She had the golden talisman jade tome, which had been passed down for 10,000 years, but she had never heard of such a strange talisman paper. Chapter 33-34. What gold talisman? What's it for? Mu Qingya couldn't help but press her aching head. Tell me clearly. Mu Dongni sat down on the ground, burst into tears, and told Mu Qingya what had happened in the past 3 days. When she said that she was envious of her fifth sister-in-law's success and rushed to give her 1,000,000 spirit coins, she noticed that her sister-in-law looked at her as if she was an idiot. Mu Dongni couldn't help but feel frustrated. She cried, "Sister-in-law, I'm not an idiot. Fifth sister-in-law is too good at deceiving people. She's so good at acting. I don't care, sister-in-law. You're the head of the family. You must help me. I only have this little savings in my life. I can't let fifth sister-in-law cheat me out of it. I don't ask for much, and I don't want any interest. Just let her return the principal to me." Mu Qingya stared at Mu Dongni for a long time as if she was a fool. She couldn't help but spit at her in her heart. Wasn't he an idiot? What? Are you still thinking that you can get your hands on the doubled interest? You know that she's lying to you. You'll be lucky if you can get the principal back, okay? You were greedy for riches and honor, but in the end, it was all for naught. Who can you blame? Mu Dongni had been paying attention to Mu Qingya's expression. Seeing that she was silent, she couldn't help but panic. She hurriedly cried, "Sister-in-law, you have to help me, sister-in-law." "Shut up." Mu Qingya yelled at her in exasperation. She really didn't want to get involved in this mess, but in the current situation, if she didn't intervene, she didn't know if the two of them would continue to cause trouble and eventually bring the matter to old Madam. Mu Qingya sighed and turned to look at Madame Hua. "Fifth sister-in-law, is it really as second aunt said?" Madame Hua's face twisted slightly and she hurriedly defended herself. "Of course not, sister-in-law. How could I lie to her? The gold talisman did give me spirit coins many times before. But how would I know that the gold talisman would lose its effect last night? Hundreds of thousands of spirit coins were taken from me, sister-in-law." "Eldest sister-in-law." The fifth madam wailed, "Do you think I don't feel bad? Do you think I'm willing? I also want to earn money, but I don't know what's wrong with this golden talisman. It's probably because I've used it too many times that it lost its effect. In the end, I swallowed all of second sister's spirit coins and my own spirit coins." "Ask second sister. After we buried the spirit coins yesterday, I didn't go there. Until just now, he went to find second younger sister to work together with him." "Was it second younger sister?" "The two of us dug out the stone box together. So many people are really looking at it. My heart is bleeding and aching now that the item has been swallowed by the golden talisman." "You liar. You must have done something. Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence?" "Oh, the first day I buried it, I got 1,000,000 spirit coins. You said a word of bullshit and it's gone." Mu Dongni lost her mind again and wanted to pounce on Madame Hua and beat her up. Everyone hurriedly pulled her back. Mu Qingya also shouted angrily, "Where did you bury it?" Madame Hua's pupils constricted slightly. This subtle expression fell into Mu Qingya's eyes. Her face became even more unsightly. Mu Dongni hurriedly got up from the ground. "Sister-in-law, I'll take you there." Chapter 33-35. As witnesses, the Crown Prince and the little Crown Princess were also invited by Mu Qingya. Although Prince Mo had no interest in the affairs of the backyard, his little wife loved to join in the fun. Looking at her sparkling eyes and her curious look, the Crown Prince felt a little amused. He simply agreed to Mu Qingya's request and brought his wife over to continue watching the fun. The group of people followed Mu Dongni to the place where the gold was buried. Mu Qingya waved her hand and said to the group of servants behind her, "Dig up the bottom of the tree." Hua, whose face was bruised and swollen, hurriedly stepped forward and grinned. "Sister-in-law, why are we digging up the tree? This old willow tree is decades old. If we dig up the tree for our business, it will ruin the Mu family's feng shui." That's hard to say. Mu Dongni was not a fool. Hearing Hua Shi's evasive tone, she immediately understood what was going on. She hurriedly shouted, "What are you waiting for? Dig it up." The servants swung their arms forward and smashed the tree fiercely. Near noon, the old master and old madam's north courtyard was occupied by Mu Dongni's cries. "Mother, you have to uphold justice for your daughter. Fifth sister-in-law cheated your daughter of the spirit coins that I painstakingly accumulated for so many years and left me with nothing. I really can't live anymore. I can't live anymore." Zhonju hurriedly pulled her back, crying to the heavens, Miss, don't take it too hard." Old Madam's face was dark, and she felt that her head was about to explode from the noise of Mu Dongni and the others. This time, only the little Crown Princess came to Old Madam's courtyard to watch the fun. The Crown Prince didn't follow. Seeing Old Madam's bad expression, she squeezed forward and sat beside her. She took out a medicine bottle from her inner world and shook it under Old Madam's nose. Old Madam took a breath and immediately felt much better, and her head didn't hurt as much as before. The old lady patted her little hand and nodded happily at her. Then, she turned to look at Mu Dongni, who was lying on the ground and bawling. Speechless, she roared, "Shut up. What are you crying for? You still have the face to cry? You're from a talisman aristocratic family, but you're ignorant and incompetent. You can't even tell if that talisman has talisman power or not. You were deceived, so you can only say that you deserved it." Mu Dongni looked at the old lady in disbelief. Wiping her tears, she cried, "Mother, how can you say that about me? It's not like you don't know that ever since I was young, I couldn't even draw a beginner-grade safety talisman properly. Sister-in-law saw this in me, that's why she lied to me." The old lady was so angry that she was amused. "You were ignorant and incompetent since you were young, yet you still think you're right." Mu Dongni wiped her tears and sobbed, "Mother, sister-in-law did it on purpose." Sister-in-law dug up the old willow tree and found a secret passage that led to the small garden behind the fifth courtyard. "That's how my fifth sister-in-law stole my 1,000,000 spirit coins without anyone noticing. No wonder she sent 2 people to watch under the willow tree, but they didn't see any movement. It turned out that under the willow tree, under the mud and stones, had long been dug out." "Is this your first day living in the house?" Old Madam scolded. "There are so many big and small secret passages in the house. Don't you have any idea?" Chapter 33-36. Which noble house like theirs didn't have a few secret passages? The secret passage under the willow tree wasn't dug by Madame Hua. It already existed, okay? What a fool. Old Madame Hua looked at Mu Dongni with an ugly expression, then turned to Madame Hua and gave her a sharp look. Madame Hua. Madame Hua's heart skipped a beat. She hurriedly prostrated herself on the ground and wailed, kowtowing repeatedly, "Your daughter-in-law deserves to die. I regret deceiving second aunt. Mother, please forgive me. Mother, please forgive me." Now that the matter had been exposed and the secret passage had been discovered, it would be unreasonable to deny it now. Madame Hua hurriedly admitted it, but her resentment toward Mu Qingya rose a lot. This madam of the first branch was too meddlesome. If she hadn't ordered the tree to be dug, the secret passage wouldn't have been exposed. As long as she insisted that it was the golden talisman that embezzled second aunt's money, no one could do anything to her. Now that the matter had reached old Madame Hua, she could only honestly admit her mistake and ask for forgiveness to seek a glimmer of hope for herself. Old Madame Hua slapped the armrest and shouted coldly, "Where's the money? Return the money to Dongni, copy the family rules 100 times, and be grounded for 7 days. Then this matter will be over." In fact, this punishment wasn't too excessive, and it could be considered as giving Madame Hua face. But Madame Hua's face turned green and white. She pursed her lips for a long time but couldn't spit out a word. "You bitch, didn't you hear what mother said? Give me back the money." Mu Dongni stepped forward on her knees, slapped Madame Hua's arm, and scolded her. Old Madame Hua glared fiercely at Mu Dongni. "Shut up. Kneel properly." Mu Dongni pursed her lips and reluctantly closed her mouth, shrinking her head as she knelt to the side. "Madam of the 5th branch, do you have any difficulties? Speak." Old Madame Hua's eyes were sharp. When she saw Madame Hua's timid appearance, she knew that the money was probably no longer in Madame Hua's hands. The money was spent." "What?" Mu Dongni almost spat on the 5th Madame's face. "Did you just spend all of my 1 million spirit coins just like that?" Mu Dongni screamed and wailed. She slapped Hua's arm and shrieked, "I wasn't even willing to spend my husband's money, and now it's all given to a slut like you. Give it back to me. I'm still not returning it to you. Give it back, give it back." Mu Dongni punched Hua She's face again and again. The two of them had long been beaten black and blue. Everyone couldn't bear to look at them. The old lady was so angry that she threw a cup at him. With a clang, Mu Dongni and Madame Hua both jumped in fright and subconsciously shrank back. "Still not telling the truth?" the old lady shouted angrily. Hua She hurriedly lowered her head to the ground and cried out in a trembling voice, "Mother, daughter-in-law knows she was wrong. Mother, please calm down. Mother, please calm down. I will definitely return the money to second sister in 2 days." "Why 2 days?" Mu Dongni looked suspicious. She patted Hua She's arm and shouted at old Madame Hua, "Mother, don't believe her. She has to return it now, right away. Who knows if she gave all the money to her lover?" Madame Hua shouted angrily, "Second sister, don't talk nonsense." Chapter 33-37. You're the gigolo in the theater. Don't think everyone is like you. Aya, you swindled people's money and dug a tunnel to transfer people's property. How dare you accuse me? Mu Dongni raised her hand and glared at Madame Hua, wanting to hit her again. "Drag them away," old Madame Hua scolded. 2 middle-aged women with round waists and thick arms quickly stepped forward and pulled Madame Hua and Mu Dongni apart from each other, forcing them to kneel on both sides. "Mother, you have to uphold justice for me." Madame Hua scolded Mu Dongni as soon as she started to cry. "Slap her 3 times. Mother, why did you hit me?" Mu Dongni looked at Madame Hua dumbfoundedly and cried out indignantly, "I'm the victim." "Slap, slap." "Second miss, don't say anything." Mu Qingya wanted to roll her eyes at her second sister's IQ. "You know Madame Hua is angry, but you pretend to be pitiful and kneel on the side without saying anything. Madame Hua will uphold justice for you. What's the use of making a fuss? With this brain, it's no wonder Madame Hua cheated all her property." Tell me clearly where the money went," Madame Hua demanded coldly. I. Madame Hua looked up at Madame Hua hesitantly and bit her lip. I lent the money to someone for 2 days. Just 2 days. I'll return it in 2 days. What? Mu Dongni's face was red and swollen as she said incredulously, "You actually lent my money? You're a person who doesn't get up early if there's no profit." "It must be profit. How much profit? Tell me. Now that she was pulled to the side of the room by the women, there was a long distance between her and Madame Hua. Even if she kicked and punched, she couldn't reach Madame Hua, who was huddled on the side. She could only yell at her. It's Steward Lee from the Pink House. You're going to piss me off. You actually made a deal with such a lowly person? Madame Hua pounded the table in anger. Go. Tell Mu Jingyang to get his ass over here. This old woman wants to ask him how he manages his wife. Hua Shi jumped in fright and hurriedly scurried forward on her knees with a sullen face. She cried, "Old madam, please don't call husband over. Master doesn't know about this either." Abba patted the matriarch's back and helped her breathe. He raised his head and looked at Hua Shi curiously. Pink House. She seemed to have heard of it somewhere before, but she couldn't quite remember where. The little fellow was curious and couldn't help but look at Mu Dongni a few more times. Mu Dongni's face was swollen like a pig's head, which made her look a little funny. She should be her second aunt. Why did she look so poor? As a member of the Mu clan, a member of a talisman aristocratic family, logically speaking, their horizons should be very broad. Why do I feel like she wants to tear the roof off just because of a mere 1 million spirit coins? In fact, the nouveau riche had no concept of spirit coins. To her, spirit coins were just a constantly increasing number. The little girl was now only interested in some strange medicinal herbs. Other than that, even if she saw spirit tools, her heart wouldn't waver. "Old madam, please don't call husband over." Hua Shi cried and wailed. I was greedy. I cheated second miss of her money." Chapter 33-38. Elderly lady, believe me this once. I will definitely be able to get the money back in 2 days. That manager Lee promised me that he will return all 10 million spirit coins to me at that time. He won't miss out on a single cent with interest. You still believe that manager Lee? Elderly lady was about to cry from Hua Nei's stupidity. Her finger trembled as she pointed at her and scolded, "You actually lent 10 million spirit coins to that person? You're asking him to help you release the stamp money, isn't that right?" The moment old madam finished speaking, everyone's expression changed. Don't lie to this old woman. Although this old woman doesn't care about matters, I have heard of this stamp money before. Do you know that the imperial court issued a written regulation a year ago? It's forbidden to release stamp money among the people. Those people only dare to do it secretly. They were originally worried about not having enough funds, but they didn't expect that an idiot like you would hold a large wad of spirit coins and rush to deliver them money. Grandmother, don't be too angry. When the little stoic saw elderly lady's flushed complexion, it was clear that she was extremely agitated, so she handed her a cup of warm tea. Abba said dryly, "As long as that person hasn't run away from the capital, we'll find him and beat him up. We'll just make him spit out the money." Hua Nei shuddered. She felt that the little girl's eyes were penetrating with chilliness when she spoke, as if she was extremely accustomed to doing this kind of thing. At this time, Mu Jingyang's voice came from outside the door. Mu Jingyang's temper was irascible to begin with, so when he was called over and learned that such a shameless thing had happened, he didn't hesitate at all. As soon as he came in, he kicked Hua Nei's back without another word. "Look at what you've done!" Mu Jingyang shouted angrily. After being kicked, Hua Nei fell to the ground and wailed miserably, "Lord, you can't blame me entirely for this matter. If it weren't for the fact that I lost so many spirit coins to the Crown Princess a few days ago, I wouldn't have dared to offend her. This concubine also wouldn't have set her sights on second sister. We only paid the deposit for the Jade Buddha hand that we bought from Jade Stone Shop, so we still need to pay the remaining 1 million spirit coins." Mu Jingyang's face flushed red. The little Crown Princess couldn't help but interject, "Don't talk nonsense. You guys were the ones who dragged me, the Crown Princess, into the fight. Madam of the First Branch can also bear witness to this matter." The corners of Mu Qingya's mouth twitched. She nodded and said, "Indeed. Fifth sister-in-law, it was you who proposed to play Ma Diao. At that time, Crown Princess only said that she knew a little about it." Hua Shi was speechless. Recalling that she was indeed the one who had suggested to invite the little Crown Princess to play Ma Diao together, her heart was filled with anger. She hated herself for being so stupid to have thought of such an idea at that time. Xiao Mu gazed at her coldly. Fortunately, there were many people present at the time. Otherwise, wouldn't this crown prince consort have been wrongly accused by you, this fellow? Mu Jingyang was burning with rage. He wanted nothing more than to kick Hua Nei again. This stupid woman was so stupid that he wanted to cry. There were many people present. With this woman's words, everyone now knew that the fifth branch couldn't afford to buy a gift for the old master and actually had to swindle money from second eldest aunt to pay the balance. Wasn't this the Mu family's biggest joke this year? Mu Jingyang's face alternated between green and red, and the veins on his temples throbbed. Right now, he wanted to kill this group of women. Old Madam coldly said, "I'll leave this matter to you guys to handle." Chapter 33-39. Return second young Mrs. Money within 3 days. Mu Jingyang felt that he had lost all face. How would he dare to argue with his mother? He hurriedly nodded and agreed. Hua Shi, stay in your courtyard for the next 2 days and reflect on your mistakes. There's no need for you to come out. Old Madam said coldly. Hua Shi nearly collapsed to the ground. She hurriedly cried, "Mother, if you want to punish me, can't you wait until after Old Master's birthday banquet?" Tomorrow was Old Master's birthday banquet. When the guests arrived, there would be too many people and gossip. If people were to ask around and find out that she, the fifth madam, was actually grounded in her own courtyard by the old madam, then who knew how much gossip would float out about her in the future? "You still dare to bargain with mother?" Mu Jingyang chided. He dragged her up from the ground and said angrily, "Come back with me." Today, he had practically lost all his face in the sea of forgetfulness. With such a scandal, how could he raise his head in front of his brothers in the future? "Husband." Hua Shi sobbed and looked at Mu Qingya for help. Sister-in-law, help me say a few words." Mu Qingya looked as if she couldn't bear it. She turned to old madam and said, "Fifth sister-in-law only had a momentary change of heart. She was most likely tricked by someone. Mother, why don't you let her attend tomorrow's birthday banquet and show her filial piety to old master?" Old madam sneered. What filial piety? She was just competing with others. However, for such a scandal, it was fine to punish her behind closed doors. If word of it got out, she would become the laughingstock of all the aristocratic families. Old Madam felt that she couldn't afford to lose this face. Thus, she said coldly, "Since Qingya is pleading for mercy for you, then punish her tomorrow." Hua Shi heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly bowed in thanks. Then, she was dragged out by an angry Mu Jingyang. Mu Qingya said, "Pink House actually dared to target our Mu family. Mother, I think it's time to teach them a lesson." The old madam's face was also cold as she nodded slightly. "No matter what, tomorrow is the old master's birthday banquet. Everything will be postponed. After the old master's birthday, we will slowly settle accounts with them." Mu Qingya bowed and respectfully left the old madam's courtyard. Mu Qingya had been quite busy recently because she had to host old Master Shang's birthday banquet. Abba chatted with the old madam for a while longer before leaving as well. Tomorrow's birthday banquet would be held at noon. Most of the work that needed to be done had already been done in the past 2 days. All that was left was some loose ends. After Abba returned to Yulon Court, he ran into the side room and saw Mo Lien writing a letter at the table. She scampered to his side and reached out to hug his waist. Lien, that pink building, what kind of place is it? Why do I feel like I've heard you mention it before?" Mo Lien was at the end of his letter when she interrupted him. One of the words in the letter was slightly crooked. He threw down the pen and reached out to pull her to him. He looked at her in amusement. "When did I mention it to you?" "I didn't." The little fellow blinked curiously. "You didn't?" Madam of the fifth branch cheated second aunt of her money. She lent it to Pink House to let her deposit money. "Lien, is the interest rate of deposit money very high?" Mo Lien frowned. Chapter 3340. Stamp money isn't a good thing. Who knows how many families have been ruined by it since ancient times. Emolienne hugged her and sat her to the side. The imperial court banned this from the start of the year. It turns out that there are still people doing this in the dark. Arba perked up when she heard this. She snuggled into his arms and said, "Then let's go to the capital's government and report this pink house for illegal activities. Let stubborn Chow investigate. When the time comes, we'll drag that manager Li out and make him spit out everything he took." Emolienne couldn't help but laugh. He looked down at her. "You just want to beat him up, don't you?" Arba looked at him expressionlessly. She turned her head away and muttered softly, "So that Madame Hua won't tell everyone she sees that the only reason she went to release stamp money was because she lost to me in horse gambling and had no money to spend." She actually said that. Emolienne creased his brows. With a wave of his hand, A appeared before them with a whoosh. "Your Highness, what are your orders?" A asked with a grin. "Make a trip to the 5th Branch's garden and pass on my message to Mu Jingyang. If I hear his wife spouting nonsense and slandering the crown princess again, I'll pull out her tongue." Aoyi immediately left. Arba glanced at him and wiggled her head in his arms. "I won't argue with them. The 5th Branch's wife is also a funny person. She clearly has a lot of money. She lent 10 million spirit coins to that pink house, but she didn't have money to pay for old Ye's gift." Emolienne's lips curled. "So it's not your problem. It's her own illness." Arba didn't comment. She poked her head out of his arms and blinked her eyes. "It's going to be lively tomorrow." Emolienne reached out and tapped her nose. "Everyone's in the preliminaries now. When do you plan to go over? Big Brother is drawing talismans for me." The little fellow pursed her lips. Emolienne couldn't help but laugh. "Then shouldn't you go over as well?" "Of course, but it's still early." Arba wasn't bragging. With her talisman crafting speed, even if it was the last 2 hours, she would still be able to defeat everyone present. "Then when do you plan to go?" Emolienne couldn't help but laugh. "After dinner." The little fellow tilted her head and thought, "I'll draw it for an hour after dinner, then I'll come back to sleep. When the time comes, I'll see how many the person with the most can draw. I'll draw the same number as her." Arba really wanted to find someone to test the talisman on. She really wanted to know, with the same number of talismans and the same number of talismans, how much stronger would her talismans be compared to their peers. Prince Emo couldn't help but laugh. He nodded and said, "Then I'll accompany you." "No need." The little fellow crawled in his arms and reached out to touch his face. "If I go, I'll distract a lot of people. It's better if I don't go." Emolienne couldn't help but laugh inwardly. His wifey was indirectly praising him for his beauty. His wifey thought that if such a handsome person like him went over, he would definitely attract a lot of attention. It would make people stop drawing talismans and look at him. Xiao Mu looked at him strangely. Why did she feel like her husband's expression contained a bit of smugness in his spurious smile? He must be proud of Sir Jojo, the little fellow thought. That's right. Sir Jojo's talisman crafting could be said to be the best in the world. Chapter 3341. Bang, bang, bang. Firecrackers and firecrackers resounded. Today, the Mu family's doors were wide open, and honored guests were brought to the male and female guest areas by cheerful servants. According to tradition, the birthday banquet was held at noon. Before that, Mu Jingfeng led a group of brothers to receive the guests in the front courtyard. Madame Mu accompanied the old madam to welcome the womenfolk in the rear courtyard. The family competition could begin at the beginning of the birthday banquet and end before the evening banquet. Those who had nothing better to do and wanted to stay to watch could return home after watching the competition and eating the banquet. It could be said that this was an annual event for the Mu family. Among them, there were many patrician families who quite liked the banquet held by the Mu family. Not only could they test the family's knowledge of the younger generation, they could also watch the exciting competition. This kind of banquet was very popular among cultivators in recent years. Many patrician families followed the Mu family's example and began to hold birthday banquets like this in recent years. They invited many sects and patrician families to give each other pointers while celebrating the birthday. Eldest Miss Mu is here. In the rear garden, among a group of women surrounded by pearls and jade, someone called out. Everyone's gaze turned to the woman who slowly walked over. This woman wore a pure white strapless dress with yellow gauze covering it. Her hair was simply tied into a young girl's bun, and a jasper hairpin was threaded through her hair. She had a leisurely smile as she walked over. She had almond-shaped eyes and rosy cheeks, and her entire body exuded a calm and dignified aura. Greetings, eldest Miss Mu. All the women came forward to greet her with smiles. Greetings, young Mrs. Mu Rochuan nodded indifferently. Hee hee. A clear and melodious laughter came from not far away. In the small flower pavilion, there were 3 young girls sitting there. The one in the middle had a slightly pale complexion. She was the 4th branch's young lady, Mu Rochuan, with a frail body. Next to her were 2 other women who each had their own merits. These 2 were from the Mu family's branch families. The one on the left was called Mu Yuan, and the one on the right was Mu Lixiang. The one who laughed brightly was Mu Lixiang. At this moment, she was looking at Mu Rochuan with interest. With a strange smile, she said, "Oh, eldest young miss is here." Mu Lixiang smiled and smoothed the hair on her temples. With a mischievous expression, she said, "I heard that the crown princess also participated in the preliminaries yesterday. Moreover, she drew 60 talismans in just an hour. Many of them are talismans that we have never seen before." Eldest young miss fainted on the spot. Mu Rochuan's face darkened at once. Thinking of yesterday's incident, she felt her chest fill with a trace of anger, and her whole person was a little flustered. Mu Lixiang looked at Mu Rochuan's expression and became certain. "I wonder if this is true or false, or if someone made it up." She didn't have the qualifications to participate in the competition, and she didn't want to help others stand out, so she didn't go to watch the excitement of the preliminaries yesterday. However, one of her sisters went to join in the fun. When she came back, she mentioned this matter to her. She treated it as a joke and laughed incessantly. "I heard that our crown princess drew 60 peerless purple talismans in one go. Heavens, it's simply godly. Not even an hour has passed since she finished drawing, and the crown princess has already returned?" Everyone was in an uproar. They didn't dare to believe it. Although they weren't talisman masters, they had heard of talismans from their elders. Naturally, they knew what a peerless purple talisman was. "The crown princess has arrived." Chapter 33-42. At this time, there were many noble ladies sitting or standing in the garden. When they heard the sound, they all subconsciously stood up and stretched their necks to look over. With this look, they saw a person walking over from the garden's small path. She wore a very simple crimson robe, but with a discerning eye, one could tell that it was embroidered by Ni Chong Market. The rosy cloud brocade material flowed all the way over, and the skirt didn't get caught in the slightest when it brushed past the grass and trees. Instead, it was as smooth as the clouds in the sky. When the little crown princess came over, she was expressionless as usual. There was only a purple glazed hairpin on her head, which shone brightly under the sunlight. She was too beautiful. All the ladies present couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. She was clearly wearing very simple clothes and jewelry, unlike some of the ladies present, who hated that they couldn't hang their entire family's belongings on their body like a peddler's pole. But it was such a bright and beautiful person that just one look was enough to make people fall for her. No wonder His Highness the Crown Prince was so fond of her. Greetings to the Crown Princess. The group of ladies bowed in unison, and each of them had an obedient appearance. They all seemed to have the aptitude of a noble lady, but no one knew what they were thinking in their hearts. Abba glanced over and saw many familiar faces. She only nodded slightly and said, "No need to be so courteous." The ladies inwardly sighed in relief. Many of them had participated in the palace banquet back then. Most of them had experienced the Crown Princess' anger towards Madame Guerre, as well as the crown princess releasing a mechanical puppet and violently beating up Long Chong. They were very clear about the temperament of this little crown princess, and it really wasn't that great. It was the first time that he had so smoothly and gently dispensed with their etiquette like today. It was probably because she was in a good mood today that she didn't scold them. Aber didn't know what the ladies were thinking. She walked into the small flower pavilion and exchanged glances with Mu Ro Chin, who had stood up to welcome her. Crown Princess. The fourth branch's Mu Rockin smiled warmly at her, and a trace of extraordinary splendor appeared in her eyes. Yesterday, you really only went to draw for an hour, and you drew 60 peerless purple talismans in succession? Mu Rochuan stood at the side. Her entire body seemed to be emitting a black aura. She seemed to be in a very bad state. Who would have thought that this day would come so soon? The attention of everyone in the family was taken away by this outsider. They would only sigh at her youth and how powerful her talisman techniques were. They would only praise this woman in the future and would no longer have her, the eldest daughter of the Mu family, in their eyes. Mu Rochuan's fingers curled tightly together. Across the crowd, she looked coldly at Aber, who was surrounded by people. Her emotions were almost out of control. She forcefully suppressed the urge to go forward and give her a vicious punch. She turned her head with difficulty and then quickly walked away. Mu Lixiang, who had been paying attention to her movements, couldn't help but chuckle. Eldest miss, why are you leaving so quickly? We haven't even chatted for long. At the side, Mu Yuan couldn't help but tug at her, using her eyes to signal for her to stop talking. Mu Lixiang snorted. Although she was unconvinced, she didn't refute Mu Yuan. Crown Princess, we all admire your talisman drawing skills. If you have the time, Yuan would like to ask the Crown Princess for a few pointers. Forgive my rudeness, but I am Mu Yuan from the cadet branch. You might not know me yet. Chapter 33-43. The young Crown Prince consort nodded slightly, which could be considered a small response. Mu Yuan couldn't help but feel a little excited when she saw that Ji Yun Shu was actually paying attention to her. She really wanted to ask the Crown Prince consort for advice, so she tried her best to appear as humble as possible in front of the young Crown Prince consort. Mu Yuan was a smart child. She knew very well that the Crown Princess talisman crafting skills were definitely above their collective level. No, it could even be said that she was miles ahead of them. If she could receive a few pointers from the Crown Princess, she, Mu Yuan, would definitely benefit from it for the rest of her life. Aber merely glanced at Mu Yuan before turning to size up Mu Rockin. She suddenly asked, "Do you often suffer from insomnia and can't sleep at night?" Mu Rockin was startled, but she quickly nodded and said, "That's right." "Crown Princess, how did you know?" Aber stretched out her hand. "Give me your hand." Mu Rockin subconsciously rolled up her sleeve and offered her wrist to Ji Yun Shu. Aber took her pulse and frowned slightly. "This is a chronic illness that you carried when you were in the womb." She pulled Mu Rockin into the small flower pavilion and had her sit down. "You usually carry your medicine pouch with you, right?" Mu Rockin's personal maidservant hastily interjected, "Crown Princess, you're truly godly. How did you know?" "Naturally, it's because the Crown Princess's medical skills are exceptional." Mu Rockin smiled and patted the maidservant's hand. She turned to the young Crown Princess and said, "Crown Princess, is there any medicine that can save Rockin's body?" She couldn't help but smile bitterly as she spoke. In the past few years, she really did live up to the young Crown Princess's words. She carried her medicine pouch with her all the time and never stopped taking it. If the young Crown Princess could really cure her chronic illness, then she would truly be Mu Rockin's savior. It's not difficult to treat. It's just that the treatment cycle is a bit troublesome. There are also a lot of things to pay attention to. Aber said, "Come to my court tomorrow and I'll tell you in detail." Mu Rockin's eyes lit up. She nodded repeatedly and softly replied, "Okay." Madame Zhong Li and young Madame Zhong Li have arrived. The atmosphere froze for a moment. These young ladies from aristocratic families were naturally well informed. They had long since known that the second miss of the Zhongli clan seemed to have died in the Sun-Moon mystery realm. According to the young master of the Gu clan, this matter seemed to be closely related to the crown princess. Also, the madam of the Chen family seemed to have gone to the New South Garden to cause trouble with the crown princess, and she ended up in a pretty bad state. Madame Ma of Zhongli's residence had lost her beloved daughter. How could she let the matter rest? It was said that she had already made trouble with great General Zhongli twice, but to no avail. Today, was she directly taking advantage of old Master Mu's birthday banquet to kill her way into the Mu residence to cause trouble for the young crown princess? Mu Rokin naturally knew about this matter. She approached the young crown princess and whispered, "Crown princess, it seems like the people from the Zhongli clan are here with ill intentions." Aba frowned slightly and said indifferently, "Who cares if they're here with ill intentions? If they want to cause trouble for me, then let them come in vertically and leave horizontally." Mu Lixiang exchanged a look with Mu Yuan in astonishment. She inwardly analyzed this stoic-faced crown princess's personality traits. Both of them wanted to befriend the crown princess, so they wanted to grasp the crown princess's temperament in a short period of time. They wanted to avoid minefields and do their best to display their friendly side. Chapter 33-44. However, from the looks of it, the crown princess was more willing to chat with Mu Rochin, who was a direct descendant. This was probably the difference between a direct descendant and a concubine. Mu Yuan's expression flickered, and she helped Mu Rochin up. "Rochin, let's go welcome Madame Zhongli." After all, the crown princess could disregard the Zhongli family's madam and young madam, but they couldn't. Other than the young crown princess, all the girls stood up in unison and bowed respectfully. Madame Zhongli was dressed in a bright red brocade robe today, and her hair was adorned with an 8-treasure golden tassel buyao. The eldest young madam, Madame Ne Luo, had a dazzling smile, and her gorgeous robes made her look very ordinary. The two of them came hand in hand, beaming from ear to ear. They returned greetings to the noble ladies who came up to greet them, and one couldn't tell at all that they were here to challenge them. However, the appearance of the great general's wife at old Master Mu's birthday banquet was a very thought-provoking matter in itself. After all, this was a gathering of the noble families. Why did a madam of an official's family come to join in the fun? While they were pondering, Madame Zhongli walked over with a smile with her daughter-in-law. When she saw that stoic face, her eyes flickered, and she did her best to control her emotions that were about to explode. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law both appeared very dignified and magnanimous as they bowed to Auber with very polite expressions. Auber nodded indifferently and retracted his gaze after sizing up Madame Zhongli. A cold glint flitted through Madame Ne Ma's eyes when she saw that the young crown princess's expression was so indifferent and had no intention of speaking to her. "Today is old Master Mu's birthday banquet, so this madam also came to join in the fun," Madame Ne Ma said with a smile. She looked around and patted the back of her daughter-in-law Madame Ne Luo's hand. "You young people should chat together for a while. When I came over earlier, I saw Madame Gu and Madame Meng. I'll go over and chat with them." "Okay, Mother." The eldest young madam nodded gently and secretly exchanged a look with Madame Ne Ma. Madame Ne Ma left with a smile. Auber unexpectedly looked up and gazed at her back before lowering his eyes to hide the mockery in them. He clearly hated her to the point of gnashing his teeth, yet he still pretended to be so gentle and amiable. The little stoic secretly thought it was a bit funny. Zhongli Ji Wei kept courting death in the secret territory, and in the end, she accidentally killed herself. If the Zhongli family wanted to vent their anger on others, they would have to see if she, Auber, was someone who could be easily vented their anger on. Madame Luo sat down in front of Auber and the others with a smile. She seemed to be in a good mood and said with a smile, "Ladies, how long have you been sitting here?" "Hee, there are still more than 2 hours before the birthday banquet begins. Don't you guys feel a little bored?" A young lady on the left said with a smile, "Does eldest young madam have any good suggestions? We've all been sitting here for quite a while. Just now, when I came over from the front yard, I saw many young masters from aristocratic families crowding there to compete in archery. Why don't we go over and watch from afar? It's better than sitting around. Mu Rochin smiled with a troubled expression and said softly, "That's not very appropriate, right? It'll seem a bit frivolous." Madame Ne Luo's expression stiffened, and then she covered her mouth with her hand and giggled. Fifth young lady really is a well-bred young lady who doesn't step out of the house. What era is it now? Where are there so many rules and regulations? Chapter 33:45. Besides, isn't there an opera house in the garden? What's wrong with us going to the opera house to watch them compete from afar? We're all children of aristocratic families, so we're far more forthright and generous than those daughters of officials. Why would we be so restrained? Oh, are the young masters competing in front of the elegant pleasure house? There was indeed a large empty space in front of the elegant pleasure house. If the young masters were bored, they could set up a target to compete in archery. Madame Luo nodded with a smile. That's the place. The group of young ladies in the garden had long been tempted by Madame Luo's words, so they quickly nodded and said, "Fifth young lady, why don't we go over? It's too boring to be idle for more than 2 hours. Let's go to the opera house and take a look. It's so far away, what could possibly happen?" "Sure, sure." Everyone agreed in unison. It was unknown what they were thinking, but they all revealed yearning expressions on their faces. Madame Luo covered her mouth with a handkerchief and snickered inwardly. They're all young ladies who are eager for love. Crown Princess, what do you think? Mu Rockin turned to ask the young Crown Princess. Not interested. The young Crown Princess's words were like a bucket of cold water that poured over everyone's heads. The excited chatter of the young ladies suddenly disappeared. Not to mention Madame Luo, who forcefully rolled her eyes, even Mu Lixiang and Mu Yuan, who wholeheartedly wanted to curry favor with the young Crown Princess and befriend her, couldn't help but feel that they didn't want to continue conversing with this person. The young Crown Princess frowned. She clearly felt that the surrounding atmosphere had turned from warm to cold. How baffling. These women were always like this. They didn't want to talk to her after she spoke a little. If they didn't want to talk, then so be it. She didn't want to waste her breath with them. Humph. Mu Rockin coughed lightly and said, "Since the Crown Princess isn't interested, then you all can go. I'm also not that interested, so I'll accompany the Crown Princess and continue chatting here." Everyone immediately looked at each other. The eldest miss of the first branch of the Mu family had left in a fit of anger. Only the fifth young lady, who was born of the first wife, was the host here. If the host did not make a move, how could they, the guests, have the nerve to make a fuss and directly run to someone else's theater? Madame Luo's eyes flashed and she suddenly laughed. "Fifth young lady, you must be joking. As the host, if you don't go, these little girls naturally don't dare to go." She turned to look at the young Crown Princess and said cheerfully, "Although the Crown Princess isn't in the mood, why don't you come with us to take a look? Who knows? Maybe we'll see something interesting." What's so interesting about a bunch of idiots shooting arrows at a target? The little Crown Princess said expressionlessly. "Everyone, what's going on? Why do I want to chase this guy away?" Madame Luo felt her teeth itch from anger. She wanted to pounce on this little girl and bite off a piece of her flesh. Why were her words so infuriating? If the main character didn't go, the matter couldn't proceed. Madame Luo twisted the handkerchief in her hand and couldn't help but persuade, "When I arrived, I saw His Highness also there." Abba smiled faintly and turned to look at her, sizing her up from head to toe. "You really want me to go? Don't regret it, ah." Madame Luo shuddered for no reason. She only felt that the Crown Princess's clear eyes were like ice beads, piercing one's bone marrow and inexplicably making one feel a chill that penetrated one's heart. Why did it inexplicably feel a bit scary? Chapter 33:46. She swallowed her saliva and hurriedly nodded. "Crown Princess, you really know how to joke. What do I have to regret?" She had invited her to watch the archery competition time and time again, and she still dared to say that she wouldn't cause any trouble? Did she really think that she, Arbor, was a fool? The young crown princess stood up with a frosty expression and looked meaningfully at Madame Luo. Then go. She flung her crimson sleeves and took the lead to walk out of the small flower pavilion. Under the sunlight, everyone felt that the young crown princess's fluttering red makeup was extremely dazzling and eye-catching. The group of womenfolk majestically walked towards the elegant pleasure house in the front courtyard. From afar, they could hear the rowdy cheers of a group of men. The young maidens' faces were flushed red as they hurriedly walked forward. Mu Lixiang reflexively glanced at the young crown princess and couldn't help but twitch her mouth. The crown princess's stoic face and frosty expression made her look like, she was going to kill someone with a sword. She didn't look like she was going to meet the young masters of the aristocratic families. Why did she feel that it was a bit strange and she wanted to laugh? Arbor naturally didn't know what the others were thinking as she was surrounded by a group of women. When she arrived at the entrance of the elegant pleasure house, she glanced sideways. Bah, there wasn't even a shadow of her husband. She just knew that her husband wouldn't be so bored as to come watch a group of idiots shoot arrows. The young maiden's expression instantly darkened. She turned to berate Madame Luo. How dare you, Madame Luo, deceive this crown princess? Madame Luo was instantly dumbfounded. They had just arrived at the elegant pleasure house and hadn't had time to make a move, but the young crown princess had already made a move. Madame Luo's heart was in a mess. She couldn't help but secretly speculate. Could it be that the crown princess had already seen through her scheme? How could the young crown princess be so smart? Madame Luo hurriedly knelt down as if she was putting on an act. Crown princess, please forgive me. Big liar, you dare to lie to me and say that His Highness is here? Do you know what happened to the person who deceived this crown princess last time? The little crown princess looked coldly at Madame Luo. Kneel here for me. Don't get up. Madame Luo. What was going on? How did things change so quickly that she was caught off guard? Ah, it's my family's little stoic. A light chuckle sounded from behind, and a mocking voice said, What's going on? Are you teaching someone a lesson again? Luo Shi's kneeling was just an act. She expected that the crown princess would make her stand up in front of everyone. After all, this wasn't a big deal. If it were an ordinary person, they wouldn't be so calculative with her. Who would have thought that the little crown princess was such a whimsical and eccentric person? She actually wanted her to kneel in front of the Elegance restaurant and forbade her from moving? Was there any justice left in this world? No matter what, Luo Shi was still the eldest young madam of Zhongli Manor. When had she ever suffered such humiliation? Arbor looked back and rolled his eyes. Qin Xian, this guy, was standing not far behind her while holding a fan and blinking at her. He was wearing a long black robe and gently fanning himself. Do your eyes hurt? The little stoic asked expressionlessly. Pfft. A chuckle was heard from the side. It was Qin Zhou. This guy couldn't help but want to laugh. No matter how he looked at it, his big brother was throwing flirtatious glances at Miss Chow in all sorts of ways. Who would have thought that this girl would actually say that his eyes hurt? It wasn't that Qin Xian's eyes hurt, it was that his head hurt. He glanced at Arbor, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Chapter 33-47. Long time no see, Jojo. I missed you so much. Arbor glanced at him, but for the first time, he didn't retort. Do you have time to chat? Qin Xian asked with a smile. What do you want? What do you want? Without waiting for the little stoic to reply, a coarse voice cut in and shouted rudely, The person who suggested the archery competition just now was the Gu family's lad, right? What? Are you seizing the opportunity to slip away now? You people of the Divine Province truly don't treat your guests well. How can you abandon your guests and run off to talk to a bunch of women? Disdain flashed through eldest young Sir Qin's eyes, and he turned to look at the burly man striding over. This is Prince Zulu of the barbarian tribe. Ladies, in order to avoid offending you, please go upstairs first. The group of young ladies naturally blushed as they looked at the graceful eldest young Sir Qin, and their hearts swayed. When they turned to look at the barbarian prince who was striding over, the girls hastily shrunk back and turned to leave in unison. "Hey, wait." Prince Zulu of the barbarian tribe laughed with his hands on his hips. "Since these little ladies have come, then let's compete together? Our barbarian tribe's women can hold up half the sky at the very top. Could it be that your women of the divine province are all little flowers in a greenhouse that can't be touched or looked at?" Following Prince Zulu's gesture, two slender women with exposed bellies waved the bows in their hands symbolically with a smug look on their faces. A faint smile flashed through the eyes of Madame Ne Luo, who was kneeling on the ground, and she secretly lowered her head. "They're here." Qin Xian turned to look at Prince Zulu with a grin. "Are you really blind or pretending to be blind? The daughters of the patrician families of the divine province aren't interested in competing with a barbarian like you. Alright, you still don't think it's enough that you have the Gu family's brothers to compete with you?" Prince Zulu humphed. "Are your women of the divine province this cowardly?" These words were rather impolite, so the noble ladies of the patrician families naturally faced him with anger. Mu Rocken's expression also immediately darkened. "Those who come are guests. As the host, I naturally have to entertain them well. But if the guest oversteps the bounds, as the host, I have a reason to ask him to leave." Prince Zulu's face darkened as he stared at the sickly girl in front of him. She looked small, and her face was not very outstanding, but when she stood there and criticized him, she still had a bit of an imposing manner. "This little girl is quite shrewish." Prince Zulu smiled darkly. "I've taken a fancy to you. I'll make you my 33rd concubine." Everyone was dumbfounded. Mu Ro was so angry that her entire body was trembling. Her hands were tightly clenched together. "Bullshit. A mere barbarian dares to covet our miss. Go hide where it's cool." The servant girl beside Mu Ro Chin was also a shrewish person. She didn't say anything else and immediately scolded her. "Who do you think you are? Let your family's elders talk to this prince. I'll give you 10 level 10 spirit tools in exchange for this little girl." Prince Zulu shouted arrogantly. Mu Ro Chin wrung her hands. She was so angry that her face was ashen, and her heart was thumping uncontrollably. Princess Auber glanced at Mu Ro Chin and lightly patted the back of her hand. She didn't know why, but Mu Ro Chin felt that the young crown princess's gentle pat had calmed her down quite a bit. "Where are the crown princess personal guards?" Chapter 33-48. Eldest young Madame Ne Luo, who was kneeling on the ground, felt her eyelids twitch. She suddenly felt that the young crown princess's words were too familiar, right? "Present." Following the little stoic's shout, a dozen or so phantom-like shadows rushed over with a whoosh and appeared behind the young crown princess with a swish. Eldest young Sir Chin twitched his mouth inexplicably, suddenly at a loss for words. He glanced at Prince Zulu sympathetically, feeling that this guy's following fate would be very tragic. The more arrogant he was now, the more miserable he would be later. From his experience, he inferred that basically every guy who clashed head-on with the little stoic wouldn't have a good ending. Prince Zulu frowned as he looked at the little stoic. Then, he sized her up and cracked a smile. What, could it be that this little wife wants to volunteer to become this prince's 34th beloved concubine? Before he could finish speaking, a purple forest guard swung a slap at his face. Prince Zulu was a person with some skills and wasn't completely an idiot. Seeing the purple forest guard slap, the man retreated a few steps and punched out, colliding with the purple forest guard's slap. Subsequently, his expression shifted slightly, and he retreated several steps. "Prince! Prince!" A dozen or so burly barbarian tribesmen surrounded him furiously. Those two beautiful concubines with their bellies exposed also dashed forward in a panic and shrieked, "What are you doing? How can you be so rude to the prince?" "Prince!" One of the beautiful concubines turned to glare in Arba's direction and said indignantly, "Who are you? How dare you lay a vicious hand on the prince? Do you know who he is? He is so long-winded." Arba shouted impatiently and waved his hand. "Throw them all out." "Yes." Several purple forest guards strode forward and picked up the barbarian tribesmen one by one, striding outside. Although Prince Zulu had dodged the first attack, there were still 2 or 3 purple forest guards attacking him at the same time. How could he possibly be a match for them? In just a few moves, the purple forest guard had completely subdued him. At this moment, Prince Zulu was being carried by a purple forest guard. His face was flushed red as he roared, "Is this how you treat your guests? In the future, when you go out, don't brag to others that the Chinese are hospitable. Ha ha, hospitable my ass." Aba coldly looked at the barbarian and suddenly raised his hand. "Wait a minute." The purple forest guards secretly glanced at the prince and silently mourned for him in their hearts. Why did she have to provoke the young crown prince consort instead of letting them drag her out? What, 34 concubines? Prince Zulu smirked at the young crown princess. "Now you finally know to be afraid. Let me tell you, Zulu." Slap. Before this fellow could finish speaking, he was stunned by the scorching pain on his face. Prince Zulu's eyes instantly turned incomparably red and emitted traces of fiery light. He glared furiously at the little stoic standing in front of him with a ferule in her hand and roared furiously, You little girl, you actually dare to hit me?" Slap. From the looks of it, hitting someone with a ferule was very painful. After 2 slaps, 3 of Zulu's teeth fell out, and even the left side of his face became red and swollen. This fellow's hands were held behind his back and he couldn't move. He could only twist his body in an attempt to break free as he bellowed furiously. Chapter 33-49. The young crown princess stared coldly at the barbarian who spoke without thinking. The ferule landed on the man's face again and again, hurting Prince Zulu so much that tears, snot, and everything else flowed down. The 2 beautiful concubines were dumbstruck, and they screamed repeatedly, "Stop hitting, stop hitting, stop hitting. I beg you to be merciful, don't hit." Some of the onlookers, especially those who were more familiar with the young crown princess's methods, couldn't help but look at him with, "I feel sorry for you." Of all people to provoke, he just had to provoke the young crown princess's bottom line time and time again. Now that he was beaten up violently. Heh, it served him right. Although the barbarian tribe wasn't small, could it compete with China with everything it had? Since it couldn't, standing on China's soil, he didn't know how to behave with his tail between his legs. How dare he be so arrogant? Wasn't he trying to provoke disdain? At first, Prince Zulu was furious. He glared viciously at the young crown princess, wishing that he could pounce on her and bite her neck off. However, after 10, 20, 50, and 100 strikes, he didn't even have the strength to glare at her with venomous hatred. The most abominable thing was that the defensive shield around his head, which he used all his strength to protect himself, had long been shattered by the young crown princess' repeated strikes. No one could understand Prince Zulu's current agony. He felt that this was the worst torture in the world. The 2 beautiful concubines' hearts ached as they watched. They hurriedly knelt on the ground and begged bitterly, "Miss, please be merciful. Don't hit our prince anymore. The prince was only joking with you before. You're so noble and beautiful. How could you give yourself to someone as a concubine?" The 2 beautiful concubines finally came to their senses. They saw that everyone present was coldly watching the prince get beaten up, and none of them extended a helping hand. It was evident that the identity of this young lady with a stoic face who made the move was definitely not ordinary. Young Madame Zhongli, who was kneeling in front of the elegant music house, looked at the scene in front of her. Her eyes flashed and her body trembled subconsciously. The little crown princess acted too quickly. She didn't give anyone a chance to react at all. She killed the troublemaker in an instant. Who knew where she got such a way of doing things from? Filthy words can't even withstand a single blow. The little stoic looked down from above at Prince Zulu, who was kneeling on the ground with an almost unrecognizable face. She coldly shouted, "Gods! This person offended the crown princess in public and provoked her time and time again. His actions are detestable and his crimes are punishable by death. Pass down my orders, drag him out and execute him." "Yes." The two Violet Forest guards immediately stepped forward and dragged the pig-like prince along the ground, forcibly dragging him out of the courtyard. Prince Zulu suddenly felt a little desperate. His eyes couldn't help but shrink as he shouted angrily, "Are you all dead? Hurry up and save this prince. Hurry! Quick! Ah!" Prince Zulu's buttocks bounced over a piece of gravel. The pain was unbearable, and he couldn't help but cry out. The dozen or so brawny men that Prince Zulu brought with him were also extremely anxious. However, the strongest among them was merely a level 12 great spiritual cultivator. They were completely unable to resist being suppressed by the three Violet Forest guards and could only look on helplessly as their prince was dragged out. "You can't do this." Chapter 3350. The prince is our great king's most beloved son. If you harm even a strand of his hair, the great king definitely won't let you off. One of the barbarian tribesmen couldn't help but shout. Everyone silently glanced at the extremely wretched Prince Zulu and couldn't help but observe a moment of silence for him again. Right now, your prince didn't just suffer a strand of hair injury. His entire body, including his hair, was injured from head to toe. Who can stop this crown princess from killing someone she wants to kill? The little crown princess looked coldly at the barbarian tribesman who was hooting and kicked him through the air, sending him tumbling backward and sprawling on the ground with a plop. "Who gave you the guts to dare speak to me like this?" A whip sparkling with electricity suddenly appeared in Arba's hand. With a slight flick of her wrist, a force swept out and rushed towards the dozen barbarian tribesmen opposite her with a whoosh. Crack! Sparks flew in all directions as the whip landed on several people's bodies, sweeping them away. At the same time, the whip spun in the air and emitted a row of crackling electricity. The little stoic waved the long whip in her hand as she looked at the barbarian tribesmen and said coldly, "Submit or die. Choose yourselves." The few barbarian tribesmen were startled, and at the same time, their bodies shrunk back. "If you're not speaking, then die together with your prince." "Ah, if you kill our prince, then the great king." Pachi. The whip carrying electricity swept across that person's stomach, sending him flying heavily and landing limply on the ground like a puddle of mud. Only then did the barbarian tribesmen feel fear. At first, they didn't think that this woman from the divine continent would be so heavy-handed. Now that they saw someone die, they realized that this woman from the divine continent wasn't joking with them, nor was she threatening them. If they didn't submit, they really would die. "I submit, I submit." The first person immediately crawled over and knelt at Arba's feet, wailing in a tearful voice, I'm willing to submit. Honorable Miss, we failed to recognize the pearl and offended you. Please forgive us." Prince Zulu was so angry that he almost fainted. He managed to yell, You dare to betray me, ah." However, at this moment, in order to save their own lives, the barbarian tribesmen no longer cared about a broken prince who had almost lost his life. Moreover, as long as one person surrendered first, it would be much easier for the others to surrender. Moreover, in their opinion, there was nothing shameful about surrendering to the strong. They couldn't beat him in the first place, so why should they continue to pretend to be strong? Chow Mu swept them a disdainful glance, and her gaze swept over their fawning faces. Afterwards, she turned to that Prince Zulu, whose eyes were about to burst, and said coldly, "It goes without saying who exactly is the coward." A faint smile appeared in Mu Ro Chin's eyes. She didn't know why, but when she saw the little crown princess beat up that bastard, she felt a trace of satisfaction in her heart. Perhaps the little crown princess herself didn't know, but when she was unrestrained and even a little domineering, she was so dazzling that people couldn't look away. Cough, cough, cough. Zulu suddenly laughed wildly. Chapter 3351. You're at death's door, yet you still dare to be so insolent. Be careful or you'll die of laughter. The young maidservant beside Mu Ro Chin glared hatefully at Prince Zulu. Zulu roared angrily, You people from the divine continent are all hypocrites like this. You knew you were about to lose, so you forcefully dragged this prince out. You. His gaze landed on Gu Yixuan, and his eyes turned. Zulu roared angrily, You brat, this woman is the reinforcements you called over, right? You knew you were about to lose, so you used this method to escape. Simply shameful. Gu Yixuan's face flushed red, and he subconsciously clenched his fists. What nonsense are you spouting? How could the young crown princess be the reinforcements he, Gu Yixuan, called over? Don't joke around. Not to mention that it was still unknown who would emerge victorious in the competition between him and this pig-headed prince. Even if he knew he was about to lose, he couldn't have called for reinforcements like the stoic face. There was still enmity between the two of them. Was this Prince Zulu beaten up by the young crown princess and had his head blown off? His words were a complete mess and simply illogical. Aber gazed icily at the barbarian who hooted and said icily, Stalling for time is useless. At this moment, there was true silence in front of the elegant pleasure house. One could hear a pin drop. Even Prince Zulu, who was yelling at the top of his lungs, was hit by the young crown princess's icy words. He instantly shut up, as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. I thought that since you dared to provoke me, you naturally had the courage to bear the consequences of this provocation. Aba's gaze swept over Prince Zulu, who was being dragged to the ground. However, I seem to have misjudged your courage. You're executing me like this? I won't accept it. Prince Zulu shouted harshly. His shoulders were forcefully pressed down, and he couldn't budge at all. You think I'll continue to waste words with you? Aber glanced at him coldly, and his gaze swept over to Madame Luo, who was kneeling on the side with her head lowered. A calm glance swept over, and Madame Luo was immediately dragged forward. She jumped in fright and couldn't help but cry out in alarm, What are you doing? What are you doing? Tie him up. Xiao Mu waved her hand slightly, and two purple forest guards immediately dragged the shrieking Madame Ne Luo over and tied her to the target rack. Madame Luo's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. She opened her mouth wide and shouted in shock, Crown Princess, what are you doing? How can you treat me like this without asking for the reason? Madame Luo almost asked, Do you still want your reputation? You are the crown princess of the divine land. Is it really okay for you to be so cruel? The noble ladies who were watching the commotion in front of the elegant lounge were also shocked by this scene. Aba's cold gaze shifted to her face, and he said expressionlessly, Still not willing to speak? You must be the one who called this idiot prince over. The Zhongli estate is secretly colluding with the barbarian tribes. They're up to no good. The little crown princess said coldly, Everyone has the right to punish them. Madame Luo's eyes narrowed, and she shrieked, Crown princess, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't speak nonsense like this. What evidence do you have to say this? Are you trying to frame the Zhongli family in public? Evidence? Aba sneered and glanced back at the two purple forest guards. In the divine land, is there any punishment that can make people confess? Chapter 33:52. I heard that royal father has a barrel of bliss that seems to be quite fun. Why don't you lend it to this crown princess so that the prince can play with it? If Madame Luo hadn't been tied up, she would have collapsed to the ground long ago. At this moment, she felt unprecedented regret and fear. She had only heard people say that the young crown princess wasn't to be trifled with, but it wasn't until she dared to provoke her that she finally understood how those unlucky fellows felt. She regretted it. She regretted that she had been pressured by her mother-in-law and accepted today's mission. Unexpectedly, Prince Zulu had just started his provocation and was beaten down by the crown princess with lightning speed. His current sorry state was truly frightening. Replying to the crown princess, the common punishment is flogging. A purple forest guard cupped his fists and said, If you want to escalate the punishment, you can start with cutting off fingers, chopping off hands, or chopping off feet. See which one the crown princess likes? Eldest young Sir Chin couldn't help but twitch his mouth. This purple forest guard was rather interesting. Freaking, see which one the crown princess likes. Did they think this was cooking? The young crown princess swept a glance at the sweating Prince Zulu. Then let's start with cutting off fingers. Prince Zulu paled and shouted angrily, "What are you doing? Are you trying to beat me into a confession?" The young crown princess shook her head expressionlessly. "I only want to beat you into confessing, not beat you into a confession." Prince Zulu still wanted to spout nonsense, but the purple forest guard didn't waste time with him. He directly took out a small bamboo board about the width of a palm. On it was a slender nail that emitted a frightening cold light under the sunlight. Before the purple forest guard's hand could fall, Prince Zulu's face was covered in cold sweat as he shrieked. He spoke rapidly, "I want to compete with you in archery. If you win, I'll tell you everything. If you lose, you have to let this prince go. Otherwise, I won't say anything even if you beat me to death. Then you can go die." This idiot was rather persistent in competing with archery. It looked like he was rather confident in his archery skills. "Send someone to guard the Mu family's garden. If anyone dares to trespass, kill them." Arbor coldly issued an order. Immediately, dozens of figures flew out from the shadows and rushed out of the garden. Cold sweat dripped down the foreheads of the barbarian tribesmen. They finally realized that it was completely unwise to be unreasonable with this little girl in a place like the Divine Province. Who knew how many hidden guards were hiding around the little stoic? Arbor turned to look at Kuru, who was sweating profusely. "Your men can't get in. We're just wasting each other's time." She glanced at the pitiful creature indifferently. "Fine, it's still early. I'll fulfill your dying wish. This crown princess can compete with you in archery, but the rules will be according to my rules." A moment later, Prince Zulu's shoulder was finally released. Rubbing his aching arm, Zulu moved his arm slightly. When his gaze shifted forward, his pupils involuntarily contracted. The target had already been moved to the garden's entrance. There was a full 800 meters between the Elegance restaurant's entrance and the target. A black cloth covered Prince Zulu's eyes. He could only spread out his spiritual conscience to sense Madame Luo, who was 800 meters away and clattering her teeth. At this moment, Madame Luo was truly regretting her actions. She was tied to the target frame, and a lush green apple was placed on her head. Chapter 3353. The rule of the competition was that Prince Zulu had to hit one of the wings of the butterfly on the little green apple to win the competition. That's right, it was this strict. This was the competition rules set by the wondrous crown prince consort. Madame Luo forced herself to stay awake. If she wasn't tied up, she would have collapsed into a pile of mud. Prince Zulu was fighting for his life, and she was also fighting for her life. But she felt that both of their lives were going to end here today. There was no chance of winning, okay? Why aren't you shooting? Arbor scolded impatiently. She hated dilly-dallying the most. If you want to shoot an arrow, then shoot it. Didn't you insist on it? Now you're acting like a coward, your hand trembling while holding the arrow. What do you mean by this? I've already given you a chance. What are you waiting for? Arbor couldn't help but scold him when he saw him trembling while holding the arrow. He didn't look like he was going to shoot at all. Not like a man. Trembling all over the place, you coward. Prince Zulu clenched his teeth. He didn't know if it was because of fear or shock, but he couldn't sense Madame Luo's presence from 800 meters away, much less the apple on her head, or the butterfly on it. Wasn't this a trap? Prince Zulu couldn't help but take a deep breath. With a flick of his finger, an arrow flew out, piercing through the air. With a momentum that could pierce through the sun and moon, it shot towards Madame Luo, who was about to explode. Ah! Madame Luo couldn't help but let out a blood-curdling scream. She watched as the arrow pierced through her cheek. The sharp aura of the arrowhead scraped past her powdery face. Instantly, a burning pain spread to her heart. Her face was hurt? Her face was hurt. Madame Luo's eyes widened in horror. There were hundreds of people gathered on the field, but not a single sound was heard. Many noble ladies' hearts were still thumping wildly at this time. They all received a signal at the same time. The young crown prince consort was an extremely dangerous person. If they didn't want to die on the spot, it was best not to provoke the ruthless crown princess. This is impossible. Prince Zulu yanked off the black cloth in front of his eyes in a rage out of humiliation. He turned around and aimed the bow in his hand at Xiao Mu, who was just inches away from him. He yelled madly, "D***woman, go die first." So. An arrow flew in from outside the courtyard and hit Prince Zulu's right wrist where he was knocking the arrow. Bulu was caught off guard and his wrist was broken. He screamed and the arrow fell to the ground with a bang. Aber didn't even change his position from the beginning to the end. He was still standing in the same place, staring coldly at Kuru, who was paralyzed on the ground. If it wasn't for the commotion at the elegant lounge, the crown prince would still be accompanying the old master and chatting with the other family heads. Now that he had accompanied the old man here, he just happened to see a fool shooting an arrow at his wife. He must be tired of living. What's impossible? Prince Mo's eyes were cold as he looked at Bulu's group. The Violet Forest Guard immediately came forward and whispered a few words into his ear, finishing the story in a few words. Emo Lien's eyes became even colder. He turned to Bulu and said, "Impossible?" He stretched out his leg and kicked the bow that Kenlu had dropped on the ground into his hand. Chapter 33:54. He closed his eyes and knocked an arrow. His movements were smooth and without the slightest hesitation. It was as if Madame Luo wasn't far away at the courtyard's entrance, but was just standing in front of him. Emolien's fingertips moved, and the arrow shot towards Madame Luo at the courtyard's entrance like a stream of light. When everyone looked over, they saw him holding the bow single-handedly. His sleeves fluttered, and his dark hair cascaded down like a waterfall. His features were picturesque. What a slender, elegant, and handsome man. Mu Ruian, who had just come out of the flower arch door, was simply mesmerized. She stood there with affectionate eyes as she foolishly stared at him, unable to take a step for a long time. Madame Chiu, who had come with her daughter, immediately noticed her daughter's mesmerized expression. She immediately became angry and slapped the back of her daughter's hand. "Mother, what are you doing?" Mu Ruian returned to her senses and glanced at her mother in dissatisfaction. Madame Chiu said with a sullen face, "Mother remembers telling you before, right? Don't think too much about things you shouldn't think about." Mu Ruian angrily flung her mother's hand away and walked forward in a huff. She grumbled, "What do you mean I shouldn't think about it?" She hadn't even fought for it, so how did she know she shouldn't think about it? Madame Chiu's eyes instantly widened, and she chased after Mu Ruian with an exasperated expression. She reached out and grabbed Mu Roxian's arm. "Mother has several decades of life experience. Would I harm you?" Madame Chiu slapped her arm and said with a stern expression, "Do you understand?" Mu Ruian hatefully flung Madame Chiu's hand away and stomped her foot. "Mother, what are you thinking about?" "How am I thinking about anything randomly?" Mu Ruian flung her arm in dissatisfaction, feeling wronged with reddened eyes. "Forget it, you wouldn't believe me even if I told you." Madame Chiu looked at her daughter in disbelief. "If that's the case, then that's for the best. Mother is just reminding you." Reminding. Mu Ruian forcefully suppressed the resentment on her face. Her fingers retracted slightly as she tightly clenched her fists. Why would she need her mother to remind her? She had been very clear-headed from beginning to end. If she didn't fight for it, how would she know that she couldn't do it? At this moment, in front of the target stand at the end of the court, there were already many servants cheering, "Your Highness hit the target." His Highness the Crown Prince hit him. His Highness the Crown Prince raised his hand and shot an arrow. Without the slightest hesitation, the arrow instantly hit its target. Everyone saw it clearly. At this time, Someone was holding the green little apple and hurriedly ran over. He said with a smile, "I got it." Prince Zulu looked at the apple in the servant's hand with an ugly expression. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The arrow was clearly a very ordinary arrowhead, but it really pierced through the butterfly's wings and nailed the poor little butterfly to the apple. Chiao Mu pursed her small lips and pulled out the arrowhead from the small apple. She then pinched a bit of medicinal powder before gently fiddling with that small butterfly. The butterfly suddenly moved and flapped its wings. It immediately jumped up from her palm and flew away in a daze. Wow! Still alive! The butterfly is still alive! Everyone couldn't help but cry out in surprise. In other words, His Highness' arrow didn't kill the butterfly at all. At most, it just knocked the little butterfly unconscious. It was truly a marvelous skill, superb beyond compare. Chapter 33:55. On the other side, Madame Luo was already foaming at the mouth from fright. She leaned against the target and fainted. She had truly fainted from fright. There was no other reason than the fact that the Crown Prince's sword whistled through the air. Its power was truly astonishing. In that instant, Madame Luo felt as if her head was about to be pierced through and shot to death. How could she not be scared out of her wits and pass out? "Did you see that?" Emolienne tossed the bow in her hand indifferently and glanced coolly at the dumbstruck Prince Zulu. "Who says it's impossible?" "That's because you can't." Prince Zulu's tanned face instantly flushed red. This was the first time in his life that he, Prince Zulu, was mocked for not being able to do it. This was intolerable. Zulu's eyes widened as he glared at Prince Emo. That's because I was injured." You weren't injured, so of course you're stronger than me." "Oh." Emolienne glanced at him and curled her lips in disdain. "Even if you're fine, even if you grow 8 arms and 16 legs, you're still not qualified to be my opponent," he said coldly, then raised a hand. "No need to stall for time. Your people were taken care of before they could even break in. You have nothing to look forward to. What are you waiting for? Do as the Crown Princess says." Several Purple Forest guards strode forward and dragged Prince Zulu out of the courtyard like a dead pig. The tribesmen of the barbarian tribe were all scared out of their wits. They hurriedly knelt on the ground and put their palms together to kowtow. "Please forgive us. We didn't know it was the Crown Prince Consort. Don't the Chinese have an old saying? Ignorance is blameless." The barbarian tribesmen repeatedly kowtowed, their faces pale as they cried, "Please forgive our prince." Chiao Mu gazed at them coldly. They seemed to be very pitiful. "But pitiful people must have something to hate," Arbor said coldly. Emolienne sneered. "Oh? Do you really not know the identity of the Crown Princess?" The faces of the barbarian tribesmen instantly turned as white as paper. They looked at each other and pursed their lips, unable to say anything. This prince must have abducted many women. If she was not present today, who knew if they would have abducted the 5th young lady and left? Of course, this was the Mu family. These people might not have the guts, but with this barbaric prince's style, he might come to give gifts and recruit concubines to discuss them. Prince Zulu was dragged out. As for what would happen to him, Arbor didn't care at all. Emolienne walked to her side and held her little hand. He lowered his head to look at his wife's expression. Not bad. He didn't seem to be angry. He raised his hand and patted her little head. "Jojo, let's walk around. We have nothing to do anyway." Arbor couldn't help but find it funny. She knew that Emolienne saw that she was in a bad mood and wanted to walk with her to relieve her boredom. Actually, she was very calm. To her, Zulu was nothing more than a fly. Could a person get angry with a fly? If you see a fly flying over, just slap it to death. Could it be that you would be so angry that you couldn't eat because of a fly? That was impossible. She tilted her little head at him and nodded. Chapter 33:56. At this time the old man also walked over and said with a smile, "Crown Prince, there's still some time before lunch. Why don't you take Jojo to the side hall to eat something first?" The old man felt that it was better to let these two little fiends play together as soon as possible. Was it easy for him to hold a banquet? Now she even had to suffer such a fright. "Jojo, are you hungry?" Emolienne's eyes curved as she looked at her with a smile. "I'll take you to eat some snacks." "Okay." Arbor nodded with a very obedient appearance. It was like a completely different person from that frightening and murderous look from before. "What's going on here?" A resounding voice glided over, instantly breaking the silence. Originally, everyone's mood had already calmed down a bit. Especially those noble ladies who were quite frightened. Although seeing His Highness the Crown Prince being so obedient to the young Crown Princess made them feel a bit uncomfortable, they didn't dare to blindly be jealous. After all, the young Crown Princess was an extremely dangerous person, and they were already very clear just now. The main key was to not provoke such a frightening person. Secondly, they had to befriend her. Even if this fellow could make people feel disgusted with just a few words, they still had to brace themselves and befriend her. Just as the ladies summed up their experience and decided to go and get to know the young Crown Princess from afar, this cold shout made their hearts hang in their throats. F***CK, can't you just take a leisurely stroll around and laugh? Their hearts were about to fall apart when they heard her loud and quiet voice. The person who shouted angrily was none other than Madame Ma, who had left her eldest daughter-in-law here to lure the young Crown Princess into the trap while she herself hid far away. This madam was used to hiding behind the scenes and instigating others to take action. Previously, she instigated Chan Baojia's mother to go to New South Garden to provoke the Crown Princess. In the end, Madame Chen returned in defeat, going for wool and coming home shorn. This Madame Ma hid in the shadows and watched in horror. She had been scheming at home several times until today, when she finally instigated Prince Zulu of the barbarian tribe to provoke the Mu family again. Unfortunately, he failed on the verge of success. No, it should be said that the idiot Pod Lu was killed by the little Crown Princess before he could even make a move. How could this be? Madame Zhong Li was puzzled. This little Crown Princess wasn't some kind of immortal. She wouldn't be able to see through the other party's strategy. She had only just stuck out her butt. Could it be that she knew what they wanted to do? Their original plan was for Prince Zulu to provoke the Mu family, and then, inadvertently, have intimate contact with the little Crown Princess. Right after that, they would wantonly announce that the Crown Prince Consort and Prince Zulu were in an ambiguous relationship. After that, there would naturally be a series of actions to prove that this ambiguous relationship was absolutely true and effective. They were determined to sabotage the young Crown Prince Consort and His Highness the Crown Prince's marriage. As long as she ruined the marriage and made her lose her Crown Princess identity, there would be a series of good shows waiting for her in the future. Did the Crown Princess think that this matter was over? It wasn't over. Pod Lu was just the beginning. She caused the death of her daughter. Madame Ma was determined to make her die a horrible death. But all of this plan, inexplicably, before it could even be implemented, it died prematurely at the speed of light. Pod Lu didn't even touch a single strand of the little Crown Princess hair, let alone touch anything. Chapter 33:57. In fact, Madame Ma had already discussed with Kong Lu before. Her conditions were very tempting, and Madame Ma had repeatedly praised the Crown Princess's beauty in front of Kong Lu. Kong Lu was completely moved and agreed to cooperate with her plan. This had taken her a lot of effort. Everything had been so perfect, but why did it fail? Madame Ma was puzzled. At this moment, she clenched her fists and tried to suppress her anger. She walked in front of the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess and bowed respectfully. Madame Ma said faintly in a strangely calm voice, "How did this subject's daughter-in-law offend your Highness and the Crown Princess? She was tied to that target frame and suffered such pain?" These two people didn't care about the general's residence at all. A trace of anger appeared in Madame Ma's eyes. Even His Majesty had always been polite to the general's residents, but the Crown Prince and his wife treated them like this. Arbor looked at her coldly. Madame Zhongli, you're not hiding anymore? Madame Ma paused and then said, this subject doesn't understand what the Crown Princess means. Arbor raised his hand and tugged at Emolienne's sleeve with an expression that said, I can't be bothered to talk to this person. Emolienne was a bit amused. She looked down at her, then looked up at Madame Ma and said with a half-smile, you don't think that we don't know what you and Konglu are up to, do you? Madame Ma froze and felt a thin layer of cold sweat on her back. But she quickly calmed down. She didn't show it on her face, but she sneered silently in her heart. This madam isn't some 16-year-old little girl. How could I be tricked by a brat like you so casually? Your Highness the Crown Prince is joking. Madame Ma bowed graciously and said with a smile, what could this subject and Prince Konglu be up to? Hasn't Konglu been staying at your Zhongli residence these days? The Crown Prince said faintly. Madame Ma was not flustered at all. The imperial city was only so big. Prince Zulu's visit to the general's residence was very open and above-board. It was a meeting between friends. The general's residence was upright and not afraid of others talking about it. Besides, ever since Zulu entered Dragon Flame City, he had not only visited the general's mansion. He had also visited many well-known families in the city. If His Highness the Crown Prince wanted to convict the general's estate based on this point, he might not be too inexperienced. Hades Ba, the Crown Prince called out. A ghostly figure appeared out of thin air and threw something at Madame Ma's feet without any explanation. Madame Ma was shocked. She lowered her head to take a closer look and almost screamed out loud. Her expression changed greatly and she took a few steps back. It was the round head of Prince Zulu, and a bloody confession. Zulu has confessed everything. What else do you have to say? Mrs. Ma took a few steps back. She looked up with a pale face and stared at the man in front of her in disbelief. Such a crude and violent method did not leave any room for rebuttal. He directly used iron-blooded factual evidence to slap in front of you. It's written clearly in the confession, Emolienne said faintly. Your plan is clear at a glance. What else is there to say? Madame Zhongli. Go and invite General Zhongli over, Emolienne said calmly. Chapter 3358. This Madame Zhongli was truly laughable. Did she think everyone else was a fool? When Madame Chen came to New South Garden to provoke them, Emolienne had already sent people to investigate. She had long known that Madame Chen was a bird that stuck her head out and was instigated by Madame Zhongli, who was hiding behind the scenes. From that day onwards, Emolienne had secretly mobilized the Yu court guards to sneak into the general's estate and keep an eye on this madam. Her every move, every little trick, all fell into the eyes of the young couple. Did they still think that their plan was flawless and flawless? She was simply a fool. Today, when Madame Luo came to provoke them, Arbor knew what she was going to do next. Thus, she repeatedly looked at Madame Luo with a meaningful gaze. Thus, when Pod Lu said that he did not know the Crown Princess, it was all an act. How could he not know her? In order for the plan to succeed, Madame Zhongli must have described her appearance to Pod Lu. Take her away, Emolienne said coldly. Grandfather's birthday banquet still had to continue. As for their private matters, they could invite the general to the Mu estate and slowly discuss it. The general did not refuse. After knowing that something had happened to his wife, he hurriedly brought people to the side hall. At this time, Madame Ma's hair was drooping, and she was lying on the ground in a sorry state. Madame Luo, who was also in a sorry state, was lying on the ground beside her. Her entire body was drenched in cold water, and she was shivering as she leaned on Madame Ma. Her eyes shrunk as she looked at Arbor and Crown Prince Lien in fear. This couple was simply the devil. They did not waste time talking nonsense with you. They immediately ordered people to bring a few buckets of ice water and drenched the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. They were so sorry that they wanted to scream. However, they did not dare. The atmosphere in the side hall was frighteningly oppressive. The The crown prince sat in the middle and looked at them coldly, as if he was looking at two corpses. When General Zhongli brought his eldest son, Zhongli Ping, over, he saw his wife shivering like a drowned rat. When Madame Ma and Madame Luo saw them, it was as if they saw their savior. They could not help but cry, "Master, master!" Ma She crawled over, but before she reached the general's feet, she was glared at by him. Emolien ordered someone to throw the confession letter in front of General Zhongli and said calmly, "General, how do you think this matter should be dealt with?" General Zhongli's hands trembled slightly. He took the blood letter and glanced at it. As if struck by lightning, he turned around and glared at Mrs. Ma. He hurriedly lifted his robe and knelt on the ground. "Your Highness, Crown Princess, please forgive me." His son, Zhong Liping, also hurriedly knelt down and lowered his head, looking very loyal and honest. The great general has made a lot of friends recently. Emolien looked at him with a faint smile. She sized him up and said, "You have Prime Minister Chen in the imperial court, and you have many Zhonghu friends outside the imperial court. Now, even Prince Zulu of the barbarian tribe is your honored guest, willing to work for your wife." This crown prince didn't know that the great general was so powerful. Isn't it a little too arrogant? Great general? Cold sweat rolled down General Zhongli's head. His head was lowered and he barely managed to spit out a few words through his trembling teeth. This old subject deserves to die 10,000 times. This emperor received a secret letter. Crown Prince Amo looked at Great General Zhongli with a grin and said, "He said that Great General is in a vacant residence in a garden on the outskirts of the city." Chapter 33:59. This crown prince's voice was unhurried, making it hard for people to grasp his thoughts. Even General Zhongli, who had been on the battlefield for a long time and was used to seeing big scenes, couldn't help but have his emotions rise and fall with him. Emolien chuckled softly and continued, "I heard that General Zhongli has a dozen or so Zhonghu friends who are above the godly state in that residence." General Zhongli's heart thumped. Emolien smiled and glanced at him. "It is said that they usually make quite a big commotion." This prince heard that a few of them are great bandits who have been wanted by the imperial court. They have killed more than a dozen people in other people's families, stolen people's secret treasures, and snatched people's wives and daughters. It happens from time to time, and I don't know if it is true or false. This official is terrified. General Zhongli's head was covered in sweat, and a thin layer of cold sweat appeared on his back. What courtyard in the outskirts of the city? Those were some godly state experts that he had hidden in an empty temple in the forest in the outskirts of the city. There were as many as 30 people. The crown prince actually knew everything? This couldn't be a trick, right? General Zhongli was so suspicious that he didn't even dare to raise his head. He knelt there and thought about all sorts of things, so much that his heart was about to explode. Yuba! The ghostly figure appeared in front of General Zhongli again and threw a few large gunny sacks on the ground. A pile of round and bulging heads rolled out from the inside. They looked ferocious and terrifying, and each of them looked like they had died with their eyes open. Madame Luo and Madame Ma hugged their heads and screamed. They were so scared that their hearts were about to burst. Devil! This crown prince in front of them must be the reincarnation of a devil, the reincarnation of a ghost. Zhongli Ping, who was kneeling behind General Zhongli, was also trembling all over. From head to toe, every pore felt a layer of terrifying coldness. Xiao Mu expressionlessly looked at this family of four, and her small nose inadvertently wrinkled as she knitted her brows. Prince Emo looked at her as if he had sensed something. He raised his hand and held her small hand. His gaze was cold. "Why aren't you packing up? It stinks to his Jojo." He touched his wife and raised his hand to fan her face. A faint medicinal fragrance wafted from his palm and immediately covered the stench of blood in the hall. General Zhongli was now fully aware that the crown prince must know everything. Although this crown prince had just returned to the imperial court, he was very resourceful. He was even able to find out about the fugitives he had placed in the run-down temple outside the city. This person was too terrifying. Great General, Prince Amo looked at him with a smile and said calmly, "What do you think we should do? This old subject deserves 10,000 deaths. 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 This Emolien's lips curled up as she asked with a smile. You want me to submit a memorial to His Majesty to sentence you with the crime of having your entire family exterminated? Or will you obediently hand over the commander's seal and retire to your hometown? I know what to do. Emolien held his wife's hand. When they appeared in the banquet hall again, General Zhongli's family had already apologized to Old Master Mu and left first. Zhongli's family probably wouldn't be able to taste the dragon meat now. Greetings, Your Highness the Crown Prince and Crown Princess. The women were very quiet this time. When they saw the two coming from afar, they hurriedly bowed. No one dared to provoke the little Crown Princess again. First Madam. Song Lu hurried over and whispered in her ear. Mu Qingya's expression changed. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.